going on, y'all? Hank here from Voltage Studio. Today we're going to be taking a look at the CR-10S Pro. This is the version 1. So I've had this printer for about 3 years now. It's been a fantastic printer. I really haven't had to do much to it. I did put in a magnetic bed. I did do solid bed mounts and a Z-Sync kit. Other than that, the printer is completely stock. And it's been completely fine. I've just been keeping up with maintenance, replacing nozzles as needed and whatnot. And other than that, I don't think I've had a single issue with it. But I want to move into printing more reliable with flexible filaments and stuff like that. So I decided to go ahead and pick up the Bondtech DDX extruder. Another reason why I decided to go with this is because I'm really starting to getting into time-lapse videos. And with a Bowden style tube, it's just very, very hard to get that little bit of stringing out of there. And so, moving to a direct drive is gonna, has already helped. I do have another one of these printers already set up with the Bondtech DDX. I've been running it for a couple months now, and I've really had it dialed in. I just haven't had the chance to go ahead and throw it on this printer. But since I am throwing it on this printer, I want to go ahead and make a video and show you guys how to do it. Show you the setup for how to flash the firmware. I'm going to be using tiny machines. How to do a little bit of printer maintenance when you're going through here, and also kind of talk about the features like the solid bed mounts, the Z-Sync, and the magnetic bed. Now, what you're going to need for this will kind of vary a little bit depending on how deep you're getting into it, but this is what I'm going to be working with. I'm going to be using some non-stick lubricant. I'm going to be taking off these, since the ball screws need to come off, I'm going to take these off. I'm going to get them completely clean. I can see some gunk and kind of stuff that's gotten in here and everything like that. Get them completely clean. Go ahead and lubricate them and get those taken care of while having it apart. You are going to need a very sharp utility knife. This is going to be for part of the DDX installation. They do send you a small bit of Capricorn tubing, and they give you 2 print files. And I'll put them up on the screen right now. So it's a cutter for the PTFE tube, and then also it's an insert for the hot end that's going to go in here. Now I'm going to be sticking with the original Creality hot end to go with this. I'm not upgrading to a Mosquito or anything like that, at least not right now. As far as I've seen over the last couple months with my other one, it's been printing great. I mean, you can go with Micro Swift, I think the Mosquito, there's a couple different other ones. I so far haven't seen the need of it for the materials that I'm working with. The next thing that you're going to need is a multimeter. Now, the way that this Bondtech extruder, it is a smaller pancake style motor. You are going to have to change the VREF voltage to the motor. I believe that the stock one up here is currently at 1.5 amps, and then you have to drop the other one down to 0.7 amps. So I'm going to show you how to do that, which is fine because we got to open up the bottom of this anyways to be able to flash the screen firmware. The next thing that you're going to need is a set of digital calipers. I'm going to use this to set my bed height from my gantry, since I do have the solid bed mounts. And I keep seeing people that want to level off the frame of the printer. I level mine off the bed, and it seems to work pretty well because your bed is your reference point to your gantry. So I'll show you exactly how I do that and how that's set up. The next thing you're going to need is the SD card. So I have this SD card preloaded with the screen firmware from Tiny Machines that I'm going to put on there. For upgrading the firmware on the printer, that's going to be a different process. You're going to have to connect this from a USB to your computer and use a program like Cura to go ahead and upload the profile. I will include a link to that if you're doing this same one, so you can download exactly what you need for the screen and for this if you're running this stock setup with this type of ABL. If you're running the BL Touch, or if you're running a different, I believe if you're running a different hot end or anything like that, everything's got to change because the dimensions and everything change as well. So, I mean, they have hundreds and hundreds of files for different printers, different setups, and everything like that for running the DDX. So it's kind of a little bit more difficult to go through and see exactly what you need. I think I uploaded 2 different files before I grabbed the right one. And yeah, it didn't make sense. They have a whole bunch of codes after that like that. So I'll be sharing either that code directly or a link to the code, exactly what I'm running on here. The next thing we're going to be needing is the basic tools that, there's my other Allen. The basic tools that came with the printer. You're going to use your Allen keys, your Hotend keys and everything like that. And then I also am going to be mostly probably using this small little toolkit. I got this off Amazon a long time ago, and I do have my needle nose back in the print room off Amazon a long time ago, and I use this thing all the time. I think I have 3 different sets. I have one in the office, I have one in the garage, I have one in my work set that I take with me to jobs and everything like that, and it's absolutely fantastic. So that's what we're going to be using to get through this. I don't have the template for the PTFE cutter. It's actually on the printer right now, but I will show you guys exactly what that is and then link a file to this. Bondtech does a really good job of explaining step by step on their website how to install this. So if you're confused about anything, I will link that below as well, and you can go ahead and check that out. So let's get on to unboxing the Bondtech and see what we got in here. Alrighty, so when you get the DDX, you'll see on here, genuine Bondtech DDX for V3 for Creality CR-10S Pro. So do make sure that you're getting the correct part. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. Do make sure that you're getting the correct part for your printer, for your setup and everything like that. They do have a lot of different options. You'd hate to pull everything apart and then realize that you don't have something that you need. Congratulations. I really like Bondtech's packing. They really make everything nice and neat. They have everything all labeled. So the first thing that we're going to pull out is right here, DDX version 3 adapter set. So this adapter set is for the fan. So they do send you a new fan. And it looks really nice. So yeah, it's definitely a lot more durable than the stock one that comes with. And so I do appreciate that because I like high quality parts. Go ahead and pull this out. So they do include a little adapter right here. This is going to be a filament guide that gets installed where your stock extruder went. This just kind of helps get the filament from the filament runout sensor into the Bowden tube that they provide and get that down to the direct drive motor. They have everything nicely packaged in here as well. So here's what they give you. They give you some PTFE tube. A couple zip ties. Oh, this is the PTF cutter, which is funny because I'm printing that out right now, so I'm not going to need it. But yeah, so they give you the PTFE cutter. This is an extension cable for the direct drive motor. Since you're mounting this motor onto your gantry now, you do need to extend this. So we are going to talk about this a little bit about this wiring as well, because you do need to make sure that your pins are switched for your motors just like these. Both of mine versions were, but they do call us out in the directions, so it's something you need to double check. I'm not sure why those pins got switched later on in some of the CR10 products, but make sure you're paying attention to that. This is just regular hardware and the tensioner for the extruder drive gear. They include some clips to clip your Bowden tube to your electrical cable. I found that I didn't use these. They did not work very well, and they didn't stay in place, so I ended up just sticking with the stock one. So those are pretty much trash in my opinion. They give you just enough Capricorn tube to make this installation possible. I'm not sure that if they give you any additional, but I was able to use the amount that I needed and without an issue. There we go. And finally, the Bondtech direct drive motor. So this is going to get mounted on the gantry. Your Hotend will be installed into this portion of it. and it will make all your parts just 1,000 times better, as long as you have your settings correct. So that's what comes in the box, and now we'll get on to the installation. All right, y'all, so the first thing I'm gonna do on my build, since I do have this Z-Sync, like I said, I am gonna go ahead and take this apart, perform a little bit of maintenance. If you're just interested in the DDX, if you go to this timestamp right here, then we'll get straight into this installation. You could skip all that. If you are interested in this, I'll talk a little bit kind of how this works as well. So before I pull this apart, there is a belt run across on the backhand side of here that I'll also show you. And that it locks these two motor positions in together. So sometimes if you've noticed when you have your bed, you know, you get it perfectly level, you go through, you come back to start your next print, and then one side's lower than the other, and you have to go through and shimmy and redo everything again. Something I found extremely helpful is adding this Z-Sync mod and then solid bed mounts, which means these bed mounts, once you tighten them down, they don't go anywhere. So there's a piece of aluminum in between these beds that keep them at a fixed place. So between that and this Z-Sync, I think the last time that I had to level this bed was a year and a half ago. I mean, honestly, not even kidding. I never touch it. It just keeps the position no matter if the motor's off, it's on, or anything like that. And of course, I do have to re-level if I go through and I perform any type of maintenance. If I take anything apart, if I move the gantry or anything like that, you always got to re-level. All right, well, I had to wrestle that a little bit. So these have these small bearings that sit inside this portion. The ball screw goes through, and then this gear sits on top with the belt. The bearings were stuck a little bit on both of them, which never had that much trouble getting them off, but so I had to take the ball screws out completely and then kind of knock them free. But I kind of wanted to show you this, you know, this is what I'm seeing. You know, my ball screw is very, very dirty. So, you know, all this can cause trouble by getting stuck in here. And so I am gonna take apart this back portion as well. Hold on. So these are just finger tight. And there are some washers on mine, so you make sure not to lose them. But yeah, I'll show you real quick. I'm not sure if you can see, but yeah, look how dirty that is. So I want to get all of this completely cleaned out while I'm going here and taking all this apart. Just some preventative maintenance, and then we'll move on to here. Alrighty, y'all. These things are all nice and clean, as well as the ball screws. So now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall all these parts. I'm going to take the ball screws over to the sink and spray a decent little coat of this non-stick lubricant on here to really give a good coat. Alrighty, y'all, I went ahead and got the ball screws all cleaned up, got them re-lubricated. I temporarily put my Z-Sync back in place because later on I am going to be going in and leveling the bed after we go ahead and switch this out. But now we're going to go ahead and move on to the DDX installation, so I'll show you guys all that. Alrighty, so we're going to disassemble the hot end, get the fans off so we can switch everything over. It's a pretty easy step. I'm sure you have probably done this before. And if you haven't, welcome to your first time. Now, when you're taking these apart, make sure to keep track of which screws go where, even though you are going to be replacing some in the kit. But it's always good to just keep track of what you're doing. And now there's our shroud. As you can tell, mine is pretty dirty, so we are definitely going to be cleaning that up while we go ahead and get in here. There's a lot of hair and stuff in there. Alrighty, now we are going to remove the Capricorn tube from the hot end. Which in my case, I'm going to need to remove this portion. And we have everything disconnected. All right, now we got everything cleaned up a little bit. We're gonna go ahead and take the hot end. We're gonna take the either 3D printed cutter, or if it was included in your kit, cutter. You're gonna take your Capricorn tube, and you're also gonna take your razor. So what you're gonna wanna do is, and this does not clip on or anything like that, just put this portion on the end, insert your Capricorn tubing all the way, push down, and make sure you're on a flat surface and cut. Now I'm gonna have to go ahead and lower my gantry a little bit since I'm gonna be using my bed plate as my cutter. And get that out a little bit. And now you wanna make sure that this cut is parallel to this. So you wanna have it as flat as possible. So I'm gonna take mine down just a little bit more. Get myself positioned a little bit better. And make sure your razor blade's sharp. Don't use a dull one. If you have this portion which you've been using for a little bit, if you're using this type of cutter, you can go ahead and cut that off. Or I should say break it off, and then you can use that. So I'm going to push onto my cutter. And we are going to cut. And that's what you should be left with. All right, so after you cut, you should see just a small amount left. Let's see, that looks like maybe approximately about 5 millimeters left sticking out of the top portion. All right, so after you've cut your tube, you're gonna go ahead and grab your hot end spacer. Now you wanna make sure that the comb portion is facing down towards the hot end and not the other way around. So we're gonna go ahead and put that in. And so it should be seated like this. After you finish that process, you're gonna go ahead and grab the extruder gear setup. On the back portion of here, there are two 2.5 millimeter screws. Now you're gonna go ahead and back these out. You don't have to back them out all the way, just about 1 millimeter is enough. That's gonna loosen it up just a bit so you can fit your hot end inside of here. Keep track of your orientation. The front side of the heater block extrudes a little bit past this. So we are just going to slide this in. And it fits pretty snugly right against there. So after pushing that portion in, go ahead and tighten these bolts back up. And no need to like super crank down on them. Just tight enough is good. Alrighty, that portion is installed. Okay, so next thing you're gonna grab is your extension cable for your stepper motor. Now, this can only be installed one way, so it's pretty easy. You have a male connection on the side of the motor, and the female connection will be installed on the other side. So once you install that portion into there, you're going to take your wires and tuck them back right underneath here. It can be a little bit tricky. You just want to make sure that you're gentle on there and you don't rip anything. So at the end, it should look exactly like this. All right, so now comes the fun part where we get to mount this thing. I did have to move my inductive sensor down a little bit just so I could clear this. I was having a little bit of trouble. So if these pegs aren't matching up to the back of the Bondtech DDX, it could be that you have this thing too high, which you can adjust later on. So I just loosened up the grub screw, dropped it down a little bit, and went from there. So there is an order how you want to layer this wiring. You want to make sure that your thermistor and your heater wire go in here first. So make sure that's not underneath the gantry. So that lays down in here first. Then you want to take your, let me move this around. Then you want to take your hot end fan, go ahead and put that into the channel. And then you want to take your parts cooling fan and put that into the channel. So when you end, it should look like this. So in the kit, you're going to get M3 by 20 bolts. However, the lock washers, you're going to have to recover from the ones that you moved over there. So go ahead and take those off, put those bolts on, set them aside, and then go ahead and get your hex key set up to the side as well. Because you're going to be holding all this wiring in by hand while you go ahead and flip this around like this to line it up to the gantry. Okay, so now that's attached to the gantry. With those stubs that come out, it should just sit there, but then you can go ahead and take your screws, put them through your hot end, now you want to take a look at your wiring back here as well and make sure you don't have anything pinched. Like mine, for example, I can see that part of my fan wiring for my hot end is pinched a little bit. So I'm going to back this out just a little bit and go ahead and push that back in place. There we go. Now it's in there. Okay, so now I can tighten that down. You definitely want to make sure that you're not tightening down on the wire. You don't want to break anything, because then you'll be getting into replacing wiring and soldering and all sorts of stuff like that. So take a look, make sure everything's fine. Your inductive sensor cable is going to be ran along with the Z motor extension wire, and that's going to get zip tied up there in the back as well. And then we're going to tighten this down, and we're going to move on. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and install the front hot end fan. They do include 3 new bolts in these as well, and you only need 3. So go ahead and get these installed. All right, so now we have our side part cooling fan on. In this model that I got on the DDX website, it shows a little bit different. It shows that the CR-10S Pro has to have an adapter onto the fan. However, it does look like they went through for the CR-10S Pro and changed the kit. So on this fan, it actually includes the adapter to connect to the DDX housing. I'll try and show it to you real quick. So right inside here, this is all part of the fan, and it will connect inside of here. Let me see if I can get a better, there we go, a little bit more light. Okay, so as part of the fan, it has the mount attached in here. So this will just attach to the side of the DDX. You don't need anything else. This already comes with the M3 screw pre-installed, so you do have to back that out. Once you back that out, you're able just to clip this fan on and off, and then this fan will be able to move up and down along here. You'll be able to find the position where you want your part cooling fan depending on which hotend you have. So just do a little testing. A good test is to put a glass of water underneath here as well. You just want to make sure, obviously, that your fan is above your hotend so you don't hit it against the bed. So now that we have that fan on, we can move on to securing the wiring. They do show in the instructions, they take their wiring and just run it on the outside of this wiring loom. I don't like that very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the current zip ties that I have on my wire loom, and then I'm going to run this through here so it's all connected together, and then I can zip tie it all together so it's all nice, neat, and clean. I do need to grab my snipping tool, so I'll grab that real quick, I'll cut these, and then we'll run that through. All right, got the trusty snips. If you have a Creality printer, you've seen these. I have tons of these all over the place. So let's go ahead and cut the loom on this backside, which they include zip ties, but you might want to have some extras on hand in case you want to secure it in some additional places. And just like that. So I'm able to pull that through, tighten it up through the wire loom. Get my other connectors back inside. And there we go. So this is what you want to see at the end. And then you have your connector here, now on the backhand side, to extend your Z motor out. Okay, so on the back here, they actually built in zip tie mounts. I know that they're really hard to see, but you can run your zip ties through here to secure this. I know that there is a model on Thingiverse for a strain relief cable as well. So you can print out an additional strain relief that will hold this up better. I'm probably gonna be doing that at some point as well. I need to do it on my other printer. Even though that these zip ties are secured there, just from the way that it moves, this sleeve has slid back, and now I'm just kind of showing my exposed wires. It should be okay, but to have a little bit better of a mechanical attachment would not be such a bad thing. Okay, so in the kit, there's a bunch of zip ties. I believe there's 4 included. And so on this part cooling fan side, there is a little hole right at the top. And if you just put your zip tie through, I mean, you can simply just push it. Let me get you back in for a little closer look. You can literally just push this and it comes right through. So now you have your zip tie here that you can zip tie down. It'll keep your cables kind of position managed in a better position. So I'm going to push my sleeve back down as much as I can. Get my zip tie connected. There we go. Got that all connected. And so now you can see zip tie connected right there. Take my snips and just clean up that end. So we can go ahead, if you haven't already, and remove this Bowden tube. you are not going to be needing it, not going to be using it. Now, if yours is still long enough or it's in good enough condition, you can use this Capricorn tubing. This has better tolerances than the type of tubing that they sent as well. It's, you know, it looks about the same size, but it's not a Capricorn tube. I am just gonna go ahead and throw the white tube on my other printer. It's been absolutely no issue, so that's what I'm gonna stick with. And I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect my Z motor. Z motor is disconnected, and then I'm gonna go ahead and start taking out all the bolts for the top of this. So on top of here, you have your 4 bolts. Bolt, 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 bolt. So once you take these out, this will loosen up this entire assembly, and then this motor will just drop out, and this will all come out of the way. And then you'll be able to install the filament guide from DDX. Now, even though that we're not going to be reusing a lot of these parts, I do like to keep them on hand, just off to the side, just for spares. And so you may need to tighten up your tensioner right here like I am to get to this bolt right here. And it is tight. There we go. Now she's been broken loose. Okay, I gotta stand up for a little bit more access to get to this. And I'm going to remove the tensioner. Now, it's pretty easy to do this. There's not really anything to mess up. You're not going to be reusing any of this as well anyway, so don't be scared to just get in there and start taking bolts off. Okay, once the tensioner is out of the way, then you'll have access down to your last bolt that is holding the Z motor on. Just put your hand underneath the Z motor, make sure that it doesn't fall. Because if you do want to use this motor later for any point or anything like that, you don't want it to fall onto this connector back here and possibly break anything. So those parts are completely off. I'm gonna go ahead and set all those to the side. I had my tensioner fall. And now that I have that off, I'm just gonna go ahead and wipe off this mount now that I have access to it. So with that motor out of the way, it's a good idea if you need to adjust your lead screw or anything at all on this side. Now's a good time because you have really good access to. Of course, you can do it once you put this mount on as well. It's not that big of a deal. And if you are like me and you had moved over your filament runout sensor, this filament runout sensor is now going to get mounted back in place. You have to put it back in place. You don't have to, but it's going to be a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen those up and move mine back over. So I'm loosely putting, oh, as I just throw it, I'm loosely putting these bolts in. And then I get to mounting the filament guide. Hey GoPro, stop recording. All the filament guide. I did recover the metal push fitting from one portion of my Bowden tube setup. You need to be careful with these because, you know, just like this one, see this one is, when it's held vertically, it's got a nice little spring to it. This one actually completely fell apart. And when that happens, usually the metal portions actually fall out of there. So it's always good to have a couple of these on hand. I have some in the garage, but since this one's still good, I am gonna use that. I keep paying attention to those and just making sure that they're good. Just go ahead and modulate it a couple times, and as long as it's springing back, it should be completely fine. Now, this was supposed to include M3x8 black hardware, and I only got one for some reason. It was in my package, so I am gonna recover the bolts that were holding on the other Creality extruder. And the way that these go in, these need to come in from the bottom. So you need to put this on top, this needs to go through the bottom of the plate and thread into here. The tolerance of this is very small, so it will thread. It's just a little bit more trouble. So I like to take a long screwdriver, put my bolt on top, and then position this into here. And then once I have it pushed all the way through, then I can kind of line up my hole right there. So right there, I just had my thread started, good to go. And now I can do the other one, leaving that first one pretty loose. So I can go ahead and get the second one lined up properly. Now there is some wiggle room in this for mounting here. So you want to make sure that your filament runout sensor and your filament guide line up pretty well. I'll have to turn mine just a little bit. Otherwise, because if they don't line up, you're going to go push your filament through here and it's not going to want to go through. Something you can adjust later, but if you have a spare little piece of filament, you can go ahead and test it out. So that is in, that is lined up, and now I'm going to go ahead and tighten down my filament runout sensor. And this is what you're looking for in the end. All right, so I went ahead and grabbed my little PTFE cutter. I got this when I ordered some Capricorn tube a long time ago. I mean, I've used this for years, and this thing's great. I mean, it gets perfectly parallel cuts. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this apart. And as you can see, I do not need this much tube. So probably be out right there. And now I have a tube that makes more sense. So I cut about that much off that I did not need. I'll set that off to the side. Probably won't need it. I have extra tube kind of sitting around everywhere. So reinstall my retaining clip. And then I'll just go ahead and clean up this wiring a little bit. I do have the existing, so I'll just go ahead and clean up this wiring a little bit. I do have the existing one, which works great for this. Like I said, I do not recommend using the ones that they send in the kit. They're actually pretty crappy. And yeah. So actually, I'll probably trim this down a little bit more. That's just a little bit too long for me. Remember, it's better to start short, or better to start long than end up short. So that looks much more manageable. So I took off a little additional bit. So that's pretty much it. Other than just getting the wiring cleaned up a little bit, zip tied and everything like that, that's it for the installation. Now we're gonna go ahead and move on to flashing the screen and flashing the motherboard. So Bondtech actually has worked with Tiny Machines, and they have released a set of files that's directly set up for settings and everything like that, that's directly set up for the Bondtech DDX extruder. So highly recommend putting that on there. If you're still running the stock firmware, what are you doing? It's time to upgrade. I think I remember even when the stock ones came out that you know, they didn't even have thermal runaway and stuff enabled. So a lot more safety features and everything like that, and it's just gonna make the printer run a lot better. So let me go ahead and reposition everything like this. We'll start opening up the bottom of this. We'll connect it to power, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so now that we got the bottom off the printer, we got it flipped up on its side, I wanna go ahead and point out the terminals where you're not gonna be working with. So your positive is gonna be going right here to E1. It's clearly labeled on the board, just right there, that's where you need. And then you're gonna be taking your negative terminal to the second terminal in right here. There's a black and red wire, this will be your negative. That's your negative mains in, that's your earth, so that's exactly what you're gonna wanna use. So now I'm gonna go ahead and flip on my printer. Okay, so now that the printer's on, you wanna have your setup for voltage and DC voltage. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my lead terminals and negative, and then positive to the E1. Make sure you're not touching anything else. And as you can see right there, I'm going right between 0.8 and 0.9. For the DDX, you want to be at 0.7, so I need to reduce this a little bit. So again, be very careful with your screwdriver not to touch anything. And just dial it back. This is probably going to take you a couple times. You need to just go through and just keep measuring. So that went up to 2.4 and went the other way. And there we go, 0.7. So I'm gonna leave it like that. We're at 0.7. Go ahead and shut down my printer. Okay, so now that we got the VREF set to 0.7, I'm gonna go ahead and take my SD card, and I already put my screen files on here. These are my Tiny Machine screen files. I believe that this is version 7, and right in here for the screen board, you are just going to pop the SD card in, logo facing out towards the bottom, and then we're gonna go ahead and flip that around. I'm gonna reposition the camera for when I turn this on, then it should flash the new screen files over to this. Now, if your screen files do not flash over to here, or doesn't do anything, or it gives you an error or anything like that, you probably haven't formatted your SD card correctly. So what you're gonna need to do is go into a manual format to FAT32, and then put your card files back on. Okay, so with the SD card inserted, now we're gonna go ahead and flip on the power. And if we've done everything right, on this screen, we should see files being copied. Okay, so this is exactly what you want to see. It will flip through the screens. That means that it's copying all of this over, and it will say SD card process end. That means that all your screen files are now on there. You can go ahead and flip this back off. Take out your SD card, and then the next time you turn this back on, all the new screen files should be on there, and then you can move on to flashing the Tiny Machine's firmware onto the printer as the last step. Okay, so the SD card is removed. I'm gonna go ahead and flip the power back on, and we should see the Tiny Machine screen come up. And there we go. See how the screen has changed? So quite a bit of difference. Alrighty, so now we're gonna move on to the fun part of going ahead and flashing the printer itself. What I like to do is I like to go ahead and connect my USB cable first to the printer and then open up Cura. Because when you do that, by the time that you open up the preference sections to go in there, you'll actually see your printer in there. Sometimes I have issues if I have Cura open and then connect my printer, it can become a problem. So we're gonna come into Cura over here. We're gonna go up to Preference, Configure Cura, and then you're gonna get a pop-up window. I'm sorry, I gotta add this pop-up window. Okay, right there. So then you're gonna go to Printers, Update Firmware, and then you're gonna get another one, and Upload Custom Firmware. Now, I'm gonna browse to where I have my firmware. We already went ahead and uploaded the screen firmware. So we already went ahead and uploaded the screen firmware. So now I'm going to use the 10S Pro DW7 0.4.6 hex. I'm going to double click that and we are going to start uploading firmware. Yeah, so once it restarts, you can go through, set up your bed level, and then you can go ahead and calibrate your extruder E-steps as well. It's a very important step to make sure that you're flowing the right amount of filament. And that's it. That's how you install the Bondtech DDX onto the CR-10S Pro, mine being the version 1, and you can go from there.